Jessica, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm happy to have you here today.
I'm happy to be here. I kind of feel like I'm in a sauna just because the wall behind you kind of gives that sauna vibe.
Oh yeah, the cedar. Yeah, this is pine stained walnut. So yeah, it's got that feeling to it though, nice
Yeah.
and warm and dark.
And maybe the crystal and the pyramid light, like it all kind of gives spa.
Okay. Relaxing. I think
Yeah.
that's usually what comes with spa.
Yeah, yeah.
Calm.
Yeah.
Those are the things I'm going for.
Yeah. It's working.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, let's jump right in. I want to know a little bit about what it is that you do. Let's start with there. Is that a good spot?
Sure. To tell you that, I have to give you a little bit of origin story, which is that I'm trained as an eating disorder dietitian, but I don't actually see clients anymore. So what I do is
Hmm.
an evolution of what I did. When
Okay.
I became a dietitian, I had my first job in a children's hospital that was starting an eating disorder program. Then I went into private practice. Then I started a workshop. Then I started speaking a lot. Now I'm only speaking. So
Okay.
it doesn't make a lot of sense to say I'm a professional speaker unless you know that path. I'm not a motivational
Hmm.
speaker. I don't speak on everything, but I teach health professionals to help people in their caseload with eating disorders. And I do case consultation, which sometimes we call supervision for other health professionals that are having challenges with their clients. Oh, and there's one other
Hmm.
thing, which is that I fight insurance companies that are not, I don't fight. I try to convince insurance companies to cover eating disorder care appropriately.
Okay. Is eating disorders then the thread that connects all of this?
Yes, eating disorders connects all of it. And then eventually, because I was speaking on eating disorders so much, I was, people were asking me how I became a speaker. So then I became a speaker coach too. But eating
Hmm.
disorders was the thread that got me there. I will say that I don't love using the term eating disorders when we're talking about individuals, just simply because people are people and eating disorders are a diagnosis. And so I prefer to talk about eating behaviors so that we don't leave anyone
Sure.
out, so that, you know, anyone that doesn't meet criteria for an eating disorder diagnosis might still have problem eating behaviors or eating behaviors that are disrupting their life. But from, I guess, a professional sense, yes, eating disorders and eating related topics is the theme that goes all the way through my career.
Okay. So then I guess what I would like to know is how'd you get into this? Why?
Oh, the why is very interesting to me anyway. It was a surprise to me. I didn't get
Hmm.
into it on purpose. When I was a kid, um I wanted to be a magazine editor or a chef. I don't know. I had a lot of big ideas. And when I went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be a CEO. I wanted to be the boss. Felt like people didn't listen to me when I was a kid in my family
Hmm.
specifically, so I wanted to be in
Yeah.
charge.
So you we're
And
gonna go get that.
yeah. So then
Uh-huh.
I got a C minus in calculus my first semester of college, and it actually freed me because with a C minus there was zero chance I would ever be able to transfer into the business school. So I it was sort of like, oh, free to be you and me. Now I can do whatever I want. And so I
Hmm.
didn't have a direction, so I just started taking the like those core courses that you have to pick one from this and pick one from this. And every time I picked a course, it turned out that they were in the anthropology department. And so by the time I had taken all those required courses, I actually was halfway to an anthropology major. And by the way, if anyone listening doesn't know what anthropology is, I didn't know either before I had a degree in it. It's just the study of humans. So what could be more interesting than that? And human behavior, human development. And then I took nutrition because my friend Casey said it was an easy A. And I loved nutrition as much as I loved anthropology. And so
Hmm.
I ended up going to grad school for nutrition. And what I learned there was that even though I think, and probably you would think, and anyone who kind of has common sense would think, that those things I loved about anthropology, like why you eat, how you feel about your food, how you feel before you eat, how you feel after you eat, whether eating in community is different from when you eat by yourself, like all that food psychology, all of that stuff is important in any area of nutrition. at that time, we're talking about 1994 is when I went to graduate school. So the only area that you really were allowed to talk about that was in the eating disorder field. So I
Mhm.
naturally gravitated to that because I just saw nutrition as so much more than how many milligrams of calcium you eat. There was just so much more to it. So through working in the eating disorder field is where I really got to express those thoughts about anthropology, or I even have a talk called The Anthropology of Eating because I want other people to understand that when we talk about nutrition, it cannot just be about the molecules in food. It has to be about access to food in the first place. And what do you consider food? Is a grasshopper food? Is a grasshopper not food? Like these are things that are all about anthropology. And so if you're just looking at molecules and nutrients, you're really missing out on a big part of what influences human nutrition.
Mhm. Yeah, that's absolutely true. So you have this angle or this idea of how nutrition works. What is it about nutrition and eating that really attracted you into
Oh
this?
my gosh, it was immediate. It was like, this is what happens to food when it goes inside your body. Like, what could be
Mhm.
more interesting than that? It's so weird. It's like it's happening all the time and you don't even have to, you don't even know it. You don't even know it's
Yeah.
happening. I don't know. I just thought it was so interesting. Just, it was almost like, okay, I don't know. This is called psychedelic. Um, oh my gosh, I forgot the second word. But your podcast has psychedelic in the name.
Mhm.
I've never used psychedelic agents, but I feel like the idea of what I was thinking, like with food, it was almost like being on the magic school bus and like taking like an LSD trip inside your body. Like the idea that someone knows, like I can't see it, but you can tell me that what a cell looks like and mitochondria, and then like all this amazing, 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 amazing science experiment stuff is going on inside your body. Like I would have liked school so much more if they would have said these chemistry experiments you have to do, these things are happening inside your body. Like, how cool is that? I mean, it just, I don't know. Everything I liked about school was suddenly in nutrition.
Okay. And it was the application of the things that you're
Yes.
physically experiencing, your physical
Yes.
process.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And it really struck a chord with you, it seems like.
I had never liked anything in school until I took that nutrition class. I was on
Uh-huh.
fire. And I had always kind of teased my mom. My whole family always teased my mom. She was a librarian, but her bachelor's degree was in biology. And it was kind of one of those things where I don't know, like my dad probably said it first and then it like became a theme in our family of like, "Oh my gosh, what did you think you were going to do with a biology degree? Biology? That's so boring." And so when I called my mom, I was like, "I took this nutrition class. It was so interesting. What happens to food when it goes inside your body?" And she said, "Hun, that's just biology." And I was like, "Stop ruining it for me." I mean, she's completely right, but in my mind I didn't like science. And whether
Mhm.
that was because, of the whole like gender thing with science, or I mean, I have no idea, but suddenly I was like, this is applicable to life. I like this.
Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. And here we're seeing a theme that you've mentioned a couple times, which is you didn't feel like you were listened to when you were a kid.
Oh, yeah.
You were
That's
gonna
for
be a
sure.
CEO, and now you're telling your mom this level of excitement that you're having, and then stop ruining it. It
Yeah.
was dismissed
Yeah.
and demeaned in a way.
Oh, yeah. My mom is an awesome person. And the reason I say that is she has lots of great qualities, but her greatest quality is that she is able to take critique and
Mhm.
actually implement it.
Yeah, feedback.
Yes. And so, I mean, she never said anything like that again. And she actually intervened for me. This is crazy. I didn't know this until the day I graduated from graduate school. The head of the department said it was so nice to speak with your mom again. And I said, "Again, when did you speak with her before?" And she said, "Oh, you didn't know about that?" And so I heard this whole story about how when I was a senior in college, and remember I was an anthropology major, but I had applied for a master's degree in sports nutrition. So I had none of the required prerequisites at all. And so my mom kept asking me, "What are you doing next year? What are you doing next year?" And I was a senior and I was doing pub crawls and I had no idea what I was doing next year and didn't care. So it turned out she called the school that I applied to and said, "My daughter hasn't received her acceptance letter yet." and she can't plan if she doesn't know what's going on. And they transferred her to the head of the department, who said, "Your daughter hasn't received an acceptance letter because she was not accepted to our program. She doesn't have the required prerequisites." And apparently, my mom said, "My daughter is brilliant and she's going to be a big success at anything she does. And if you don't accept her into your program, it will be the biggest mistake you ever make." And so I got a acceptance letter with an asterisk, and at the bottom of the page was an asterisk with like 7 or 9 course prerequisites that I had to take immediately upon entering the program. So my
Yeah.
mom is a meddler. She always thinks she's right. But when I come to her and say, "This XYZ thing you did hurt my feelings or felt like it intruded on my boundaries or something," she has actually been able to change. And I don't know very many people who can do that.
Yeah, that's really impressive.
So, yes, although I wasn't listened to as a child, I feel like we have
Mhm.
repaired that as adults.
That's incredible, and not a lot of people have that. And I know a lot of people, myself included, who really wish that they could have that, so that's really nice to hear. Our parents always do the best they can. They could
Agree.
do a lot better, of course,
Well,
but
I
that
think some parents
ability.
don't do the best they can, but I would like to believe that the majority of parents do.
Yeah, I think that they do what they have the ability to do.
Yeah.
They could do more. They could always learn and receive and listen and figure out
Right. But they may feel
how to improve.
undeserving. That's the other thing of their own personal
Precisely.
growth. And so
Mhm,
I said that I think my mom has an amazing quality, many amazing qualities, but one of them is that ability to reflect and change. My dad died when I was 12, so I never had the opportunity to have an adult conversation with him and say, "This is
mhm,
something that hurt me." But I have learned a lot about his childhood from my mom, and it's not hard to put the pieces together and understand why he behaved, why he was the way he was because of the way he grew up. And it wasn't an era when people had therapy or insight
mhm.
or,
Yeah, or any support, really.
yeah.
So it's easy to see why not being listened to was a dynamic then. Yeah. I'm curious,
Oh,
these
wait,
dynamics that
wait,
were
wait, wait. Can I pause you for a second? I just
sure,
had You have just given me, without realizing it, the insight of a lifetime. You just said, "I can see how not being listened to could be," did you say an issue or
a
a
dynamic.
dynamic?
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, you just opened a door for me. Thank you. Okay, may I
Yeah.
share? This is personal.
Please.
Okay.
Mhm,
My husband a few weeks ago was diagnosed with cognitive impairment,
mhm.
amnestic cognitive impairment, fancy words for he has lost his ability to retain things short term in his short term
Yeah.
memory. And
Mhm,
so I have been handling a lot of things for the past few years that he just seemed, since he retired, really unable to handle. I mean, I just thought, well, he's retired. He can do this, he can do that. And he hasn't been able to follow through on those things. And I was getting really frustrated. And this summer was the very first time we've been together more than 20 years. The first time I ever had the thought of, would my life be better without Greg? Because this is awful. And
mhm,
I would tell him, "You are not listening to me." And, um, like, "Do you not respect me? I just told you when we have to leave. How are you asking me again?" And
mhm,
I have been feeling like, not exactly ashamed, but sort of regretful, maybe like, I can't believe I thought that this person that I love and have this wonderful relationship with, that I thought he wasn't hearing me or listening to me or whatever it was. And now all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, yeah, that explains why, of all the things that a spouse could do in 20 years, the first time I ever thought, like, am I actually thinking my life would be better without this person? Are we going to get a divorce? Was because I thought he wasn't listening to me.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you also identified a core belief about yourself, so what kind of person doesn't get listened to?
Is that an actual question? Because I can tell you the answer
Mhm,
in my mind.
please.
A doormat.
Yeah. What kind of person is a doormat?
weak, someone who doesn't stick up for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone who's not good enough,
Yeah.
not
We're
deserving.
not gonna tolerate that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I'm so grateful that I have this career as a mental health professional because I think that is what brought me to think maybe he has ADD. And so we went in for ADD testing with a neuropsych, and that's when we actually got this memory diagnosis. It was not because I thought he had a bad memory. But I'm glad
Mhm.
that I was able to differentiate from he is not doing this to me.
Precisely.
And but again, there's that insight. I mean, I think
Mhm.
how many people do get divorced when their spouse has amnestic whatever because they
Yeah.
do feel they're not being listened to and they don't see that this might be a medical problem.
Yeah. And it could be any kind of situation.
That's true.
But what happens is that pain from the past when something happened when we were kids, a need that we had, a need to be seen, to be connected with, to be understood, to be attuned and valued, didn't happen. So then we develop this belief, this perception that I'm not worthy of it. And then any time that anything happens that remotely triggers that previous pain, the pain from the past then gets projected on that situation. So it might be my partner or my parents have cognitive impairment. They're losing their memory. And naturally, they don't remember details. Sometimes they don't remember who I am. But if we look at it through the lens of, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, okay, now they're not remembering these things because they don't value me. And so that pain comes from the past all the way to the present
Yes.
and gets in the relationship, and we have
Yes.
these
Who
very
wants to
negative
be in a
outcomes.
marriage where they're not valued? That sounds terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. And most of the times, you might even be valued. It's just, can we
Oh,
see it?
right. But the feeling. Oh, yes.
Mhm.
No, I think that this is you have just provided me with some serious therapy. Please send me a bill. That was amazing.
You're most welcome. That's always the goal here.
Well done.
Thank you. So I'm curious, these dynamics here of pain from the past being sneaky and unconscious and then coming up in other ways, do you see that in the work that you do with eating disorders?
Completely. I have so many experiences of that in my own life, but that is exactly why I teach a workshop called Healing Your Inner Eater. That is
Mhm.
literally what Healing Your Inner Eater came from, is the idea that and I think I probably developed it over a long period of time, but one of the sort of data points was when I went to premarital counseling with my husband and they drew these pictures of not pictures, like a genogram and said like what characteristics do you think of when you think of your dad, your mom, your grandparents, and then you sort of look at how that's flowed down to you. And then another piece was when I read have you ever read any of Harville Hendricks's books?
Mm.
Okay, well, the one I read that someone gave me was Keeping the Love You Find, and it says, write down my like most significant people in your life, all lifelong, who are of whatever gender you feel romantic about, and then you write them down and you see what their qualities are, and then you realize, like, this is my dad, basically, or you're, the parent of that gender. And so
Mhm.
all these things, realizing that this stuff is unconscious kind of freaked me
Yeah.
out. And I had to sort of comfort myself by saying, okay, well, your breathing is unconscious and your heart beating is unconscious and your digestion is unconscious. And those things are just taking care of you without you having to understand it and know what's going on. And yet I chose to want to learn more about those things. So it's kind of the same thing.
Mhm.
Okay, you have this whole unconscious process going on in your mind that is protecting you in some way, but I wanted to understand it better. And so I I can understand anything if I can apply it to eating and eating disorders. That's just my language. And so applying it to eating means looking back not just at the people who raised you, but at the people who raised them and what
Mhm.
their eating experiences were and what their beliefs were about food and eating and bodies and weight and figuring out how that transmitted down to you because there may be people in the world that are not in the US listening to this. I haven't ever lived in another country, so I can't say for sure, but I can speak for the United States and say, I think most people wake up in the morning and think they have a choice about what they eat, whether they eat or not. Now, food insecurity is a little bit of a different issue if someone doesn't have access to food. But I think there are a lot of us that are privileged to have adequate food, and we wake up and think, I made the choices I made. And we don't realize how many things were put in place for us before we even were born. So, where you live, what kind of places you can buy food in that area, what foods those stores stock in your area, whether you have transportation to get to those stores, whether you have a safe place in your house to store food without pests. All this kind of stuff was set in motion for us a long time before we were ever born. And so, absolutely, that was a long answer to your short question, which is, do those past experiences show up in our adult lives with food? Yes, not just our own past experiences, but our parents'
Mhm.
past experiences or our caregivers, and even whoever raised them, and maybe even further back.
Precisely. So we're talking a lot about situational things. Where's access to food? Where do you store food? What kind of food? These are all external involving the situation that we're in. And you're looking through the generations, which one of the things that I work with extensively is intergenerational trauma or intergenerational patterns where the way that
Yes.
we adapt to circumstances and situations gets handed through the generations.
I knew we were soulmates. Said as a
Okay.
happily married woman. But yes, that's so important. Do you want to share a little more with me about what you do? Does it ever affect eating?
All the time. But perhaps one way that we can get to it is let me ask you a question,
Sure.
which is what role do emotions play in eating disorders that you see?
I mean, I don't know how to answer that question, like in a percentage, or I mean, emotions are so connected with food. I guess the best way for me to explain it is to show you my little one act hand puppet play that I used to tell the children, which is that what you eat is pretty stable. The food isn't changing. You put the food on the plate. Maybe you cook it, so it changed a little bit, but for the most part, food is
Hmm.
food, kind of an inanimate object. On the other hand, feelings are on a roller coaster. And even the most well balanced person has tons of different feelings in a day, in a minute. You might have multiple feelings at the same time, and that's normal. If your feelings become scary, like the most scariest roller coaster you've ever been on, and you feel unsafe, then it's important to talk to someone about it. But remember, even the best medicated, best, most balanced person is still, their feelings are on a roller coaster. And that's normal. The problem is when your feelings and your food get stuck together and then your food is on a roller coaster. And so the goal of eating disorder recovery is not to not have feelings, it's just to get it separated so that your food isn't the, for lack of a better word, the passenger of your feelings. So
Hmm.
while I think that there are eating dysfunctions that are not related to emotions, I think that a lot of it is. And also, there are a lot of emotions that come from not being, feeling like your eating is out of your control. So when you have a physical ailment and you have to be on a special diet or something like that, that causes
Hmm.
tons of feelings too. And the number one cause of eating disorders is changing your eating under stress.
Stress. Stress, yes. Lack of control is one of the biggest causes of stress. So, what is the correlation between stress and eating disorders? Are you seeing higher stress, higher eating disorders? Is there some sort of
It's a
interaction?
chemical reaction. Stress
Hmm.
saps out your good brain chemistry, and food is one of many mood altering things that changes your brain chemistry. So a lot of eating dysfunction is medicating our brain chemistry with
Yeah.
food or
Okay.
without food. I will say not
Hmm.
just food is a mood altering chemical, but so is not eating, so is fasting, so is compensatory behaviors like throwing up, exercise, over
Hmm.
exercise. Um, Also, things like music, but there's a lot of things that change our brain chemistry, and food is one of them. And so, if someone is, let's say, susceptible to the changes that food and not eating or not eating causes, then that may become sort of their mechanism of choice for managing stress.
Hmm. Yeah. So this is interesting. I'd love to hear your opinion on this because a lot of people, I mean, several people that I've worked with, numerous ones, have had some sort of um, dysfunctional relationship with food, we might call it, where the relationship that they have with food is causing negative consequences in their life. And when I really look at, so when I look at it like this, I'm looking at it through the exact same lens as I would look at an addiction. Meaning, and I would define an addiction as any behavior that provides short term relief. So there's a craving of it. And this short term relief is transient and it causes long term consequences. And since there's a short term relief and a craving of it, there's an inability to give up the thing that you're craving despite the long term consequences. And then, so of course, there's relapse where we try and stop it and round we go. So, in that sense, food very much fits that same description with a lot of the people I'm working with.
Okay.
What I usually ask here, that this is the way I'm looking at it,
Yeah.
is the food is providing something.
Yeah.
The dysfunctional relationship with it, it's providing something. It's here for a reason.
Yeah.
There's some sort of wisdom with it. And so what I want to figure out is, and one of the first questions I usually ask is, what does the food do for you? And I mean, obviously, it nourishes my body, it sustains my energy, so on and so forth. But there's usually something else that's there. It's doing something. There's a wisdom here.
Hmm.
There's a reason why this dynamic's here. And once we can figure that out, all the doors open up.
Right. If you
Eh,
can get the core need met, then you might not need food to do it. May I add a
Precisely.
caveat to your
Please.
um, comparison or your metaphor or your
Hmm.
vision of food as an addiction?
Hmm.
I agree with you that there are very addictive behaviors. I agree with the positive short term and then the persistence despite negative long term effects.
Hmm.
The one thing I always caveat with talking about food as an addiction is it is so easy to make the error, in my opinion, it's an error, of thinking it's the food. So
Hmm.
if
Of
I
course.
eat a pan of brownies every night in the middle of the night, I wake up and I make myself a pan of brownies and then I eat them all. The simplistic idea would be an abstinence model. Why don't you just not buy brownie mix?
Precisely.
And that's not how, in my experience, it works with food. I would
Right.
ask someone to do that as an experiment. And if they said, oh, well, now that I don't have brownie mix in my house, all my problems are solved, I would
Mm.
happily discharge that patient. But it
Yeah.
hasn't been my experience that that's
Of
how it
course.
works, that that person will either eat something else in the middle of the night or they
Of
will
course.
put on their bunny slippers and robe and go to 7-Eleven and get brownie mix in the middle of the night. That it
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily stop the behavior. And so my
Yeah.
one caveat for anyone listening is just simply don't stop at it must be the food. I must be addicted
Hmm.
to this food. Are you addicted to eating when you're angry? Are you addicted
Yeah.
to eating other people's food, like your roommate's food that you didn't buy? And what is the
Hmm.
source of that issue as
Yeah.
opposed to just thinking that avoiding a food you just can't use that same abstinence model from the substance, but if you could you be abstinent from eating in the car if that's where the problems happen? Could you be abstinent from eating when you're angry if that's when the problems happen? That to me is a better correlation of an addiction model. And that may have been what you meant, but I've just observed that people are it's very appealing to make it a simple one-to-one correlation of food is the substance I'm addicted to
Hmm.
rather than the eating relationship or the eating behavior is the process addiction. Because sometimes we dietitians hear people talk about a food and they might be talking about heroin. I mean, when they are talking
Hmm.
about the ritual, the obtaining of it, the
Yeah.
process they go through, how they wait
Hmm.
until everyone has left home, how they hide the wreckage afterwards, it could be anything, and it's
Yeah.
not necessarily food itself. So I think that's just an important distinction that I feel better having made.
Of course. You can be addicted to food. You can be addicted to heroin. You can be addicted to the internet. All of these. are providing something. And when I figure out what that thing is, now we have some control.
Oh, yeah, that's the jackpot if you can figure that
Mhm.
out. The
Yeah.
harder part is managing it until you crack that code.
I can figure it out in just a few moments with people
Well,
every
that's a
single time.
superpower.
Well, it's just asking the right questions and really being with the people and listening to them. And so when I ask, what does the food do for you? The answers are almost always the same. And you've identified a lot of them in that short explanation that you just gave. Control, a sense of emotional regulation, a sense of autonomy in my life, sneaking, hiding, right?
Rebellion, yep.
Taking rebellion. Yes, there's so many things here. Okay, so now what I like to do is I like to ask, my teacher taught me this one, and this is one of his golden slogans, we might call as it is. We don't want to ask why the addiction. So that abstinence model, that's just focused extensively on the addiction. We don't want to ask that. We want to ask why the pain causing the addiction. So why do you need control? Why do you need to sneak? Why do you need emotional regulation through something else? Or in other words, why don't you have that already? So now that pattern that you were looking at of going through the generations and seeing these patterns that are handed down, we learned that somewhere. There was a time in our life where those dynamics were there and we adapted to those dynamics in certain ways. And that might have evolved into using something like food. This is what I see here. And usually the people who taught us this had some version of it themselves. It might not have been food, but it was something else.
Mhm.
And through the generations it goes. So addictions, when we're working with these, they're usually rooted or they're usually discussed in a certain ways. They're making a choice and deserve to be punished. And if they can be punished, then they will be fixed. That's our justice system, our entire legal system. Then there's the disease model. There's something cognitively wrong with me. There's something going on in my body, and therefore I have little control over this. But if we look at it as an adaptation, where there's a wisdom here. It's serving a purpose. And then if we can figure out how to comfort and soothe that purpose that it's serving and meet those needs in more constructive ways, usually the thing that we're dependent on changes. I'm curious, is that something that you see in your line of work? Because I mean,
Oh,
I
yeah. I
see
mean,
them
you
come through, but not
basically
as
just
much.
explained the premise of my origins of dysfunctional eating behavior model that I teach. Yes, absolutely. And that's also why anyone that needs a dietitian, I recommend that they see an eating disorder dietitian. Um, because even if you don't identify with having an eating disorder, we are the ones that sort of look within on that
Hmm.
aspect of this is more than just me telling you what to eat and then you do
Yeah.
it. And so, yeah, I agree with that. I do think it's important to identify that sometimes there is a physical issue. It's not just a
Hmm.
matter of willpower. It's not just a matter of there's I don't want to say there's anything broken in someone, but sometimes people have a chemical situation,
Of course.
hypothyroidism,
Yeah.
hypoglycemia, diabetes, celiac disease, and so they have learned to avoid things that make them
Sure.
feel bad. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of eating disorder treatment programs, I'm not trying to offend any particular profession, so I won't say a profession, but have been started by, let me just say, a non medical professional. And so
Hmm.
I have seen people come out of eating disorder treatment programs with every symptom of a clear medical problem. And the
Yeah.
entire time they've been in treatment, they've been gaslit into thinking they should
Yeah.
be able to eat everything and anything, and any restriction that they have put on themselves is part of their eating disorder. And it's not the case. So
Yeah.
my model has four pathways. There's of course an individual pathway to every eating problem, but it's biological, addiction, stress and trauma, and then learned behavior slash diet culture slash environment, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And
And
so
how many of
absolutely.
those are they're all interconnected too.
They
The
are
culture
interconnected.
plays into how you manage the stress is playing
That's
into the
all true.
environment.
But in the
Yeah.
model, you have to go chronologically back to what was the
Mm,
first thing, because
sure.
you may have learned diet culture behavior because you started to get chubby as a
Mhm.
teen and everyone criticized you.
Yeah.
But then why were you getting chubby as a teen? Was it because
Mhm.
something bad happened to you? Was it because there was
Yeah.
something going on with your hormones? So
Mhm.
they are intertwined. As an adult, you can say eating disorders are a biopsychosocial illness or whatever they say in the
Sure.
textbooks, but I believe that they have an origin. And
Mhm.
so the further back we can
Yeah.
go to finding that origin, which includes even before you were born,
Of
the
course.
further
Yeah.
back we can go to the origin, the more
Mhm.
the more targeted, I don't know if that's quite the right word, but the more targeted we can be, the more
Of course.
accurate we can be about what that core need is that needs to be
The more
solved.
powerful we can be, the more we
Oh, I
empower
love that
ourselves with it.
reframe. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The more
Yeah.
information we have, the more power we have. Yes.
Yeah. I've had an eating disorder for most of my life. And then I had Crohn's disease for several years where I was hospitalized multiple
Oh my
times. I
gosh.
was
Yeah.
put, they wanted to do surgeries, removing organs, all this stuff. I refused all of it except for one biological treatment, which I did that for 3 years. It was a for life treatment. And then I got off of it. And the amount of gaslighting and fear mongering that goes into these, nobody once ever asked me my relationship with food or, what do I do with my emotions, which I had plenty of emotions stored in my stomach and my gut that had not been addressed. And addressing those is what played a key role in healing that Crohn's disease. But I didn't really realize that I had an eating condition until I was far into it. And yeah, when I look at it and I'm like, well, what's happening here? Why do I struggle to eat? Because my weight was always really low. I'm 5'11", and there were times where I weighed 120 pounds. And I know that I've worked with people who, you know, weighed a lot less than me in that. And so I'm not trying to compare it, but, I looked, you could tell right away something just wasn't quite right there. And when I really, really looked at why do I struggle with food, it was like, oh, yeah. Was there ever a time in my life where food was dangerous or threatening, scarce? And it was like, oh, yeah, of course. When I was a kid, food wasn't exactly scarce, but there were dynamics around it. It was for certain people and it wasn't for other people. And one of the people who it wasn't for was always me. So it was always for my mom, or it was for her husband, or it was for one of their kids, or it was for the kids that they babysit. And then I go to my dad's side and he's saying, oh, he doesn't need to eat. He already ate. And so the food's not for me, it's for him, and it's for my cousins or for my uncles or whoever. And so I'm going hungry, and I learned how to push that feeling of being hungry away. And then when I would eat, I'd stuff it down as fast as I could. And I'm hyper vigilant while I'm doing it because somebody's going to come and punish me for eating. And it was so stressful.
Thank you for
Ah,
sharing that. That sounds
ah,
like you've put a lot of thought into piecing that together and healing. That's a lot of work.
yeah. And so now I weigh more than I've ever weighed before, and gaining this weight, it was, let me tell you, it was a challenge, to really get myself to eat because it wasn't just pushing the feeling of wanting to eat away. It was creating a negative association. This was my adaptation, creating a negative association for food. So it wasn't that I was hungry and I would push it away. It was, I didn't even want to eat. I was repulsed by it. I couldn't even get myself to want to eat it unless it was, a few really, really good dishes that I could consider. But even then, I would restrict myself and deprive myself. So, yeah, it was constant working, not with the food, but with the pain that was underneath my relationship with it. And the more I mean, I still a picky eater. It's really hard to eat certain things.
Well,
Um,
I'm really glad that you are willing to share this because I do think it's so important to hear people's truths. And I
yeah.
think a lot of times when I've worked with kids, they don't have a way to express their truth,
Hmm.
right? Or they
Yeah.
don't know it yet. And so I often tell parents to please don't think of this as bad behavior. This isn't something you punish,
Sure.
kind of like what you said before. And the example I give is I felt like I heard you saying it almost word for word. I say, if I put a dirty tennis shoe in front of you on a plate with a fork and knife and suggested that you eat it, how long would it take
Yeah.
for you to eat that dirty tennis shoe? It doesn't
Mhm.
look like food to you. It doesn't look like
Yeah.
anything you would want to put in your body. That's
Mhm.
what your child is facing when they say
Yeah.
they don't want to eat. They're not trying to defy you. This is a, whether you want to call it a brain hiccup or whatever you want to call it, this is real to
Defy.
them.
Yeah, look at the lens right there. It was very similar to, I'm not being listened to. I'm not worthy of being listened to. I'm being defied. I'm not respected enough to be listened to. So here we see these exact same patterns showing up. What I really see so much is the relationship with food, the relationships that we have with ourselves and others is usually very harsh. So when I mean, I've known somebody who had a terrible eating disorder when she was a child because of the amount of trauma that she was going through, which I won't get too far into. And the way that they responded to this was force feedings. They would hold her down and they would force her to
I don't
eat. And it
even
was
like
like,
hearing about that.
yeah, how harsh. And I mean, that's an extreme example, of course. But how much of this is so harsh and authoritative in those realms? We really want to start to see and be comforting and compassionate and kind and welcoming. Somebody's struggling here and they really, really need the compassion. That's, I think, one of the keys in terms of the eating. And even when we're having the roller coaster of the relationship with food, it's all of this, it's all of that, whatever it is. Can we be kind to ourselves while we're going through that? Yeah, maybe we did binge and eat. Do we beat ourselves up afterwards? Do we judge and criticize and punish ourselves for that? Can we learn to be a little kinder and more accepting to this? And of course, exercise some boundaries and choice, but be very gentle with ourselves while doing that.
Well, one of the things that I totally agree with everything you said. And one of the strategies that I teach for that is to use the word regret. Because I think when we ask people to sort of accept that it happened,
Hmm.
they misunderstand and take that to mean condone. So, like
Hmm.
you gave the
Yeah.
example of binge eating. If someone has, you know, the situation where they're sort of feel out of control and they eat more than they intended, that you're saying basically that that person that ate was a person in pain, and so
Hmm.
can we be kind to that person even though you're thinking, "Now I've done this bad thing," finger quotes, "bad
Hmm.
thing, so I need to be punished by not eating tomorrow," or something like that, and we're
Yeah.
saying the opposite. It's kinda similar with journaling. I think sometimes when we ask people to write down your feelings, when someone has an eating episode like that, they just want to forget about it and move on. And my suggestion is actually, I would really like to hear from that person because the person who's
Hmm.
sitting here in my office or on my computer screen is the person who doesn't want to overeat. It's the person
Yeah.
who, right, has different feelings. So,
Hmm.
what is the part of you that was in so much pain that you turned to food? Can we hear from that
Right.
person, please? And people
Precisely.
say, well, but I'm trying not to do it in the first place. And I say, I get that. And
Hmm.
I hope you don't. That would be great.
Yeah.
But sort of a pattern. Let's see, can we look at that information? And then the goal is, of course, to slow that process and try to clue into those feelings earlier and earlier in the process. So if someone's able to sort of wake up in the middle of a binge and recognize it and keep going, that's still a step. And then the goal is for
Hmm.
next for them to wake up in the middle of a binge and realize it and stop. And then
Yeah.
eventually the goal would be to catch it, let's say,
Hmm.
earlier and earlier. And that to me is about, staying conscious and staying present. But when
Yeah.
you're in pain, no, I mean, why would you want to stay conscious and present
Hmm.
when you're in pain? If you
Yeah.
don't have any
Well,
other outlet or option for that pain.
precisely. If you don't know how to navigate it, then of course. See, this is a defense mechanism that we all have here. When we go through pain that is too great to manage, what do you do?
Yeah.
If I were going to put you into a lot of pain and stress right now, you only have a couple options. You could set boundaries with me and make it stop. Well, if you're a kid and you're going through it,
Oh,
that's not
yeah,
an
forget it.
option.
Yeah,
You could leave, right? Kids don't have that
no,
option either. You're dependent on the relationships.
yeah.
So then the defense mechanism kicks in and you go away
Yeah.
mentally. You disconnect from that feeling.
Yeah.
So yeah, awareness is always the prerequisite
Yes.
for choice. You
Yes.
have to
Yes.
notice, you have
And
to
that's why I
identify.
recommend the word regret, because if someone's
Yeah.
feeling so ashamed of what they did, then they can't
Hmm.
look at it. They can't have insight about it. They just want to move on,
Shame.
move on, move on, because I'm ashamed.
Yeah.
I don't want to admit it. I may not even want to tell my dietitian about
Suppress.
it. Yes.
Yeah.
But if instead you could
Exile.
say, I regret it. I
Hmm.
could regret that I didn't wear sunscreen and I got sunburned, right? It doesn't make
So
me a
there's
bad
accountability.
person. Yes. And then it's, I
Yeah.
regret that binge episode. What could I do differently next time? Regret opens the
Hmm.
door to so
Yeah.
many possibilities, instead of shame
Sure.
means I can't talk about it. I can't do anything about it. I can't let
Of
anyone
course.
know that I'm XYZ negative
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah. I wonder, it seems to me like there's a prerequisite for regret, which would be acceptance. So before you can regret that you did the thing, you have to accept that you did the thing
I
or that you're
agree.
in the thing.
I
You
agree.
have to say, oh, I really want to binge right now. It's here.
I
It's
agree with you, but
present.
the problem with acceptance is the way that people hear it in their mind. Like, I think
Ah,
of it like,
yes.
if I live in Dallas, if I'm trying to get to Louisiana, I should drive east. If I accidentally drive west and get to Fort Worth, I'm so frustrated. I've driven an hour in the wrong direction. Now I have to drive an hour back in traffic just to get to
Hmm.
where I started so that I can then start my correct journey to
Yeah.
Louisiana. If I don't accept that I'm in Fort Worth, I cannot
Hmm.
go the right direction.
Precisely.
But what I think happens when we talk about these shameful things like eating, when someone has a lot of shame about it, is they hear accept and they think, I can't accept it. I can't accept that I'm a binge eater because I want to change.
Hmm.
And so when someone hears accept as I will stay stuck, that's when I ask them to use
Yeah.
regret, because it
Yeah.
identifies, yes, I did it, but I'm not saying, yay, I did it. I'm
Hmm.
saying, I did it. I hope to not do it again, or I hope to make it different next time.
Exactly. Accepting it is a part of taking responsibility for it, accountability. And this is where we really empower ourselves to make choices and do something different. But if we keep denying that it's happening, if we say, no, that part of me is long gone, I do not want you to see them, I don't want to see them, I hate that part of me, we want to pretend that they're not
Or
there.
worse, I agree that it's part of me and I would like to have surgery to remove that part of me.
Yes. This is something that I work with a lot with people is these patterns. Eating disorder would be a pattern that we have. Toxic relationships, addictions, suppressing myself, people pleasing, you name it. These are all patterns. Each one of these are an adaptation that developed at some point in our lives. So it helped us at some point. There's wisdom here. There's
Mhm.
incredible wisdom. And it's like a loyal, stupid friend.
You know
My
what?
teacher
This is
says this one as well.
anthropology, because anthropology is how we develop to survive as a
Hmm.
humanity
Exactly.
species. And you're
Yeah.
describing how people develop as individuals. You totally
Yeah.
get me. Yes.
Yeah. And so we look at this pattern, this part of ourselves, as something terrible that I want to get rid of, that I want gone. And so we're treating it very harshly. But if we can change that view, if we can start to see this pattern, this part of us a little differently, like a loyal, stupid friend, a friend who's always there for you, who cares about you so deeply that no matter what's happening, they're right there ready to help you out. You don't even have to call them to let them know. They're already there and they're danger prone. So when they get behind the wheel, things go
Oh my gosh, I use
terribly.
that exact analogy. They can sit in the
How
back
funny
seat,
is
but we
that?
cannot let them drive.
Exactly. We want to take care of them because most of the times they're little kids. They developed when we were kids for the most part. And so these are little childish versions of ourselves. They don't need to be driving the car. They don't need to take care of us. They don't need to step up and protect us anymore. We can do that
But
for
you can
them.
also thank them for being there instead of being so angry with them. Yeah.
Exactly. See, when we can change that relationship where we hate this part of ourselves, we want to exile and punish this part of us, to being grateful for this part of us and thanking them, and also having boundaries where they're not going to be able to drive the car. And I'm going to take care of all of your needs so you don't need to feel like you need to drive the car. I'm going to get us there. We're going to get there. We're going to have some great scenery. We're going to be safe. We're going to get all the stops, and you get to take a nap.
But
How about
diet
that?
culture makes everything seem like it's an emergency and we have to do it right
Yeah.
now. And it's also taken away people's competent adult voice. So everyone that's
Autonomy.
out there that's dieting is bouncing between their inner rebel that wants the not
Hmm.
diet food and their critical
Yeah.
parent that wants, or critical society or diet culture that wants them to have the perfect diet food. And these two are arguing all the time, and the competent
Yeah.
adult voice has gotten completely lost.
Precisely. So there's an inner conflict happening. There's two parts of us that are at ends with each other, and then we're the adult here, and we're in the back seat or in the trunk for that
Yeah.
matter. Yeah, this is the work right here. So now we want to bring those two parts together. Well,
Right.
before that, we want to listen to them
Yes,
first and
that's
figure out
exactly right.
what are the needs here? What are you trying to
Yes.
get met by doing this? And then can we as the adults figure out how to manage this conflict so
Exactly, exactly, and the biggest
everybody's needs get
example
met?
of it for someone with a dysfunctional eating pattern is when you're looking at a menu at a restaurant, and all you can see is 2 things. There's, 25 different things on that menu at least, and when someone with an eating dysfunction looks at the menu, they usually have divided it down into good and bad. I can either
Mm,
have the good thing, which is the, let's say, low calorie thing, or I can have the bad thing, which is the indulgence. And the truth is, there are so many things on that menu. So I ask people to use that as their clue. When you're sitting
yeah,
in front of a menu and you're starting to stress out because you think you can have the good thing or the bad thing, that is a sign to me that your inner rebel and your critical society are having a battle and your
critical.
competent
Yeah,
adult is nowhere to be found. The
yeah,
competent adult says, "Thank you, inner rebel, for your input. Thank you, critical society. You're both trying to protect me in different ways. And I'm going
yes,
to think this through with my competent adult mindset, which is, how hungry am I? How much money do I have? What sounds good?
yeah,
What are my food preferences versus my restrictions? Who am I with? When will my next eating opportunity be? How long ago was my last eating opportunity? What will I be doing next? If you're going to go run a marathon, you eat differently than if you're on your way to bed,
yeah,
right? The competent adult sees so many ways to make a choice, whereas the other two only see good and bad. And
yeah.
that to me is the biggest key, that you're not in your competent adult place
Hmm.
with eating, is if you can only see the good and bad choices and you can't see
Yeah.
that there are 150 different choices that you can make.
Hmm. How can I nurture both of those voices?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned this conflict is very stressful. And then what happens when we're under stress? Our bodies are getting all tense and all these emotions are here. And what do we do with those? Well, now a lot of us can eat our emotions. We
Mhm.
can eat as a way of soothing those emotions.
Yes, but it's also perfectionist thing, right? Because
Hmm.
if you feel
Control.
bad after you ate, then you can take that. The perfectionist thinks, if I made the right choice, I would feel good right now. So therefore, if
Hmm.
I feel bad, I must have made a bad choice. So I have to undo it somehow. And so
Yeah.
that leads to a two wrongs don't make a right situation. But
Yeah.
the competent adult knows that you can eat something and regret it and decide to do it differently next time. The competent adult
Sure.
doesn't have to have penance for
Hmm.
mistakes, if you even want to call it that. The competent adult just has life experiences and learns from them.
Yeah. Perfectionism, being perfect. What happens when you're perfect? Well, then you get accepted, you get valued. Okay, so underneath all of this conflict is just somebody who's trying to be valued and accepted. Yeah. Yeah. If we can just see that, choices become a lot clearer.
Well, and if you're trying to be valued and accepted in a society that pays way too much attention to outside experience, outside appearances, then
Hmm.
you may believe that changing your outside appearance is the key to that.
Well, you just identified a very important dynamic in our society, which is almost everything in our society values external validation. So if you were to meet all of the criteria of what society values for a successful life, you'd have money, you'd have houses, you'd have cars, you'd have family, and you could still be miserable. Yeah. We're always placing all of our needs and fulfillments outside of us. We have no power when that happens. But when we start to look at this and we say, oh, I'm having an internal conflict right now, it's not about the food that's out there. These are two parts of me inside who are fighting, and the food is just the reason why they're fighting. But this is happening inside of me. These are the things that I'm feeling. And so if I can pay attention internally and turn my focus in here and focus on this conflict and soothe it and be with it and listen to it and accept it and nurture it, well, then the external things don't really matter. But yes, that's the big lie in our society, is to focus outside of yourself always. And we see you can be a billionaire and be miserable.
I think we all can imagine people in our mind right now.
You know, like we it's funny because you mentioned an example of this earlier of wanting control. I'm going to be a CEO so people will listen to me and that I can be important. That's a dynamic that so many of these people have, is when they were kids, nobody listened to them. They could never meet the expectations that their parents had for them that said, you're not good enough, but if you could do this thing, then you will be good enough. And then society so seductively rewards you and says, if you go out there and you accumulate the things, or you go to work constantly and you kill yourself for work, then you'll be respected. Then you'll be valued. So whenever somebody's not feeling like they're good enough, then they can go out there and accumulate resources, status, power, wealth, and then they have the illusion of being good enough.
But what's
But
so
that,
ironic is that they're totally telling on themselves that they're
mhm,
unhappy people, that they had an
yeah,
unhappy childhood. That's the thing I don't understand, is how how do narcissists not realize that the narcissistic wound is there? That's the confusing thing, is that everyone else can see it so clearly. I guess it's a defense mechanism, which by
yeah,
definition makes it unconscious.
yeah. These are defense mechanisms. So if I was never good enough, well, by God, I'm going to go be good enough. If I grew up in an environment with an abusive parent, well, I can either make myself small and agreeable and please people, or I can make myself big and grandiose and go and attack the other people before they can hurt me. And if I wasn't good enough, and if I was hurt and scared and vulnerable, and if I'm going to go and become good enough and go and make myself grandiose and powerful, well, then I can rise to the highest levels of corporate power, government power, and I can go and push this trauma onto people on a massive scale. And it's totally unconscious.
I feel like you just described insurance executives very well.
Insurance executives, you name the corporate executives, name the government officials, every one of them are
Oh,
going
yeah.
through
I
this
was thinking
exact
of
same
lots of
thing.
those people, but I was trying not to get political. So I was
Yeah,
thinking of insurance. But yes, it's
yeah,
all trauma dumping. It's all unhealed
yeah,
trauma. It's
yeah,
terrible. And I just wish some of these people had someone in their life that loved them enough to hold up a mirror and say, you're not accomplishing what you set out to do. You're just hurting a whole lot of people that are hurt just like you.
yeah. Well, everybody has that person, and it's them.
Oh.
They're responsible for doing that to themselves. You know, there's a wonderful book, and it's called "You're the One You've Been Waiting For." And I mean, I'm just recommending the title of the book here, which is, yes, we're all responsible for saving ourselves. There's nobody who's going to come in and give that to us. And yeah, there's terrible consequences when we start to get into those high levels of pushing that pain and trauma onto others. But I see it on small levels too. I see it all around me, everywhere I look.
Well, sure. I remember having a patient in my office who was a teenager, and she was on the floor in the fetal position crying. And I was speaking to her mother, who was a very as prominent a figure in our community as you can get. And I said, I I know I've mentioned this before, but it's clear to me that I have helped your daughter as much as I can as a dietitian. And in order to continue working with her, we've reached the point where I'm no longer suggesting. I have to insist that you get her a therapist to work with." And the parent looked at me and said, "Well, I had 4 alcoholic grandparents, and I had to raise my brothers and sisters, and I didn't have therapy, and I turned out fine."
Ah, so much pain. All things that she shouldn't have had to deal with.
Right.
So the parental child roles were reversed. As a child, rather than having a parent take care of her, she had to be the adult, take care of her parents and her siblings.
And
How
so
sad.
I still am sort of haunted by that interaction because, I mean, that was at least 20 years ago. The part of me that just wants to say, what was the exact right thing I could have said, you know? Like, what if I had said, "I'm sorry you had all that pain in your life, but does your daughter have to go through that pain too?" You know, there's just nothing you can say in that situation that would have a good outcome. But I felt so powerless in that moment. And
Mm,
I just thought, I hope, at least for that daughter's sake, that she's hearing me provide an alternate opinion. So maybe at some point she will grow up and decide she wants her life to be different than her parent.
yeah.
Maybe that's the best I can do. But that was one of those things I still think about because I feel like sometimes someone is just in their own world and doesn't realize how much harm they're causing.
Yeah. I've thought about these situations quite a bit too. I think that when we're interacting with somebody, so if it's a client who's coming, rather than like you seeing something happening on the side of the road or in a Walmart or whatever, there's a big difference there. You
Agreed.
can't really inject yourself into somebody else's situation, but if they're coming and interacting with you, it's a different story. And well, in those situations, it's so hard because, yeah, you can't fix it and it's not your job to fix it. Although we want to fix it, we want to help. And what I found is seeing the people and seeing what they're going through is one of the most powerful things that we can do and say, wow, that must have been really painful for you. You took on so many people's burdens when you didn't have to. And that pain, as you see, flows through the generations. Your grandparents had it, your parents had it, you have it, and now it's flowing through you onto your children. And I can tell from what you just said, you don't want that to happen.
That's a beautiful way to describe it. I'm pretty sure I said something along those lines, and my experience in those situations has always been that is the last time I see those children. That
Yeah,
when you say something that is so, it's not because you said something wrong, it's because
right.
you hit a nerve that someone is not able
You
to
saw them.
hear, yeah,
Yeah,
or
you
able
saw them.
to accept, yeah. And I
And
feel
just
like,
like you were talking, just like you were saying with the people when they're overeating and they're ashamed and they want to hide it, we've seen a glimpse of who they really are, and they've spent their whole lives suppressing that and masking, trying to show something else. It
yeah.
can, yeah, be very
That's why I think
challenging.
shame is a killer. I feel like it is the thing that makes people not be able to get help.
I
And
agree.
that's why we really have to keep working on de-shaming some of these behaviors. Eating for me might be addiction or something else in your world, in your practice, but we got to take the shame out of it because it's
Hmm.
just everybody needs something. Everybody needs help. Nobody can live in isolation. And if you can't share with someone what you're really going through, and it makes me think of someone who once asked me, "Why do you feel so comfortable being yourself? Like, how did you become so authentic without shame?" And I thought about it because I hadn't thought about it. I don't even think of myself as a person without shame, but I agree with that. I agree when I feel ashamed of something, I make it a point to tell someone. But at the time, I thought, I think it's because I've spent so many years sitting across from people who are really ashamed of what they were doing with their eating and thinking, this is really not that big of a deal. So maybe the things I'm ashamed of are really not that big of a deal either.
Well, you said something super important there. When I feel ashamed, I tell somebody about it. Brene Brown, shame researcher, talks a lot about this. She says shame grows in the darkness, it thrives in the darkness. So when we bottle it up and suppress it and keep it down here, it just magnifies and overcomes and overwhelms everything. But when we can take that shame and set it out and say, here's this thing, as dangerous, as threatening as this might be, and we say, "This is what I'm going through," and somebody can see it, this really gives us a really interesting opportunity to do something with this shame, and it transforms very quickly. But if we can't do that, yeah, it's a tricky situation to navigate. I agree. Shame is there's no way out of it
And if,
unless you
as in
bring it
your
out.
situation, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so stop
Mhm,
me if this is wrong. If hunger has been coded as shame, if hunger is synonymous with shame,
mhm,
then why would you want to feel hunger? You would detach from that experience.
precisely. Yeah, and that's exactly how it was. Yeah, it was, constantly used like that, so, yeah, when I realized, "Oh my goodness, I had totally pushed the feeling of hunger away." Can I reconnect with that? And once I started sharing that with other people, like my partner, and I was telling her about my relationships with this, it softens and dissolves so much. And now people know what I'm going through. And now she helps me out tremendously with this, making nice meals, letting me get the food that I want, not berating me and shaming me and saying, "Oh, that's too expensive." And sometimes she does do that. And we can talk about it. And I'm like, "Hey, you know what? This is still challenging and I could use some help." And she's, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that." Yeah. So, yeah, putting it out there, seeing it ourselves, accepting that it's here and saying, "This is what I'm working through, and I want to do things differently than I've been doing." These are keys: awareness, acceptance, accountability, responsibility, and choice. Yeah, we become very powerful here.
You put it very succinctly. You have a way with words.
Thank you. I do that a lot with people. Jessica, before we wrap up here, I'm curious, is there anything else that you think that we should cover that you would like to say?
I think the main thing is simply that as someone who has heard all the weird stuff that people do with their food, all the non food items that people eat, all the shameful feelings people have after they eat, before they eat, about their eating, I really encourage you, if you are feeling that way, secretive about your eating, scared that anyone will find out, that you reach out to me if you feel comfortable. I will help you find an eating disorder dietitian or counselor that can help you, because shame kills and secrets kill. I really believe that there is a way for you to get help. You just have to tell someone, because otherwise there's no one can reach in and read your mind. But if listening to this has made you feel like, well, if only I knew her, I could tell her, then that's okay. Email me, Jessica@understandingnutrition.com. We'll figure it out from there.
You don't have to be strong, independent, and do everything on your own.
No, strong and independent are not synonyms.
Hmm. Very good. So that's your email. Where else can people find your work or anything else that you do?
Yeah, so my main umbrella website is it's jessicasetnick.com. That is where people invite me to speak at their conferences or can find my free resources, my podcasts, all of those things. That's probably the best way. I'm on social media, but I'm trying to stay off social media because it's pretty negative for my mental health. So just emailing me directly is really the best way.
Terrific. I will be sure to have those in the show notes here. So if
Okay.
anybody's listening, those are great ways to reach you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and I'll just add, if this is the kind of thing that you're interested in, if you do go to jessicasetnick.com, at some point a pop-up pops up for you to sign up for my email newsletter. That's the best way for us to stay in touch if you don't have a specific question, because I'm always sending out all the educational opportunities about eating issues that I hear about and things like that.
Terrific. Well, there it is. That's where we can find you. Jessica, thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Same.